Okay, greetings, brothers and sisters. Today is Thursday, February 20th. This video won't be out till, well, at least Friday, Saturday. If not Sunday, I might skip a day for some of these videos. I don't know. So I started this video yesterday, did a voiceover, and, I had some extra time, and, I did a few video clips, and then I did voiceover that you're going to hear. The first couple of clips, I think they're about, I just checked, they're about a Trump tweet towards Zelensky. And so yesterday was kind of a rough day. My wife's mother took a turn for the worst, and she was over there all day, and she got home, and her mom had passed away sometime last night. There's no reason to say anything in terms of condolences or anything like that because my wife won't be reading these comments, and it's going to be, days in advance. This is not why I'm saying it. It's been a long kind of struggle. Her mom's been deteriorating for a while, and so, we're dealing with that. I didn't know her that well, but my wife, of course, is upset about it and just, processing the grief of the thing. And the reason I'm talking about this is because we did a sitting, and I'm definitely putting this in the Journey series and maybe also in a standalone video on the Gratefullness meditation channel because we did a sitting before she went to bed. She was, very upset, and she was, going through her, the grieving process. And I've been doing these sittings every Tuesday, individual sittings for whoever wants them. And the sittings, I think, are better like for me, the sittings are more intense when I participate in doing the sitting, receiving the sitting, as opposed to giving the sitting, having the sitting be a conduit. And as a preceptor, sometimes you don't feel very much during the sitting, and people have very intense, experiences because you're just being a conduit for them. Sometimes you feel it more than others. But this was certainly the most intense sitting that I've been a part of since, this gratefulness meditation thing the past 2 years. There was a lot of energy, and like I said, it was very intense. Very, I was, it was interesting that that's the case. It was just, it had nothing to do with what the sittings are, whatever they are. They are just, it just comes, it has whatever, you're just being a conduit for divine energy to work. And in some ways, it's like waiting for the great pumpkin, but the great pumpkin shows up. Like, so, it's not the metaphor for the great pumpkin is the great pumpkin never comes, but it's like you're waiting. It's always like that with God. Whenever you do anything with God, you open up and you wait for God. It's like you're waiting for rain. It's eventually going to come. And it's just a matter of when, so it might take longer or shorter. It might be a little bit of a drizzle, or it might be a monsoon. It's just, it all depends. And in this case, it was like a monsoon of energy. Like the whole sitting was transmission, and cleaning was happening, but it was still happening after the sitting was over. There was still energy there, and I was holding my wife and waiting for her to go to sleep. And this energy was just there. There are these times in life that are very significant to a person. Death of a loved one, birth. These various other events, weddings, maybe. These days that just stand out. Like you'll just remember where you were when something happened, and you'll have a more vivid memory of that day. And some days are, like they said, they're just more intense. And certainly something like this where there's a death of a loved one. There's just this opening of the heart, and it's significant things that happen. I was in India when I found out about my mom dying, and we had a complex relationship, but it was still my mom, and I was feeling things, and underneath the, on some deeper level. And there were some, spiritual aspects to it, like just the mother, the mother-child relationship. Despite the personalities or the, whatever conflict there is, there's just something there. Your mom's your mom, right? No matter what, even if the, whatever the circumstances are surrounding your, your dynamics of your relationship as you get older. And there's a spiritual aspect to birth. And so there's significance between your spiritual life and your mom, and unfortunately, the women of today are, set up to really connect with their spiritual side, because women have a natural inclination to connect with God and, divine energy, and it just isn't prevalent today because of the nature of our society. But there's something there, and like I said, the sitting was just really intense. A lot of energy was, there's a lot of transmission, a lot of energy. And so, and I was thinking about that, how the Sahaj Marg system just always comes through. The meditations and whatever, like it provides you what you need, whatever that is, like the, and it's just, your heart is, suffering when you're in some sort of mourning or these situations, and, it just delivers and helps you process and deal with these things. And so, like I said, there's no reason to comment on it. Just, you could pray, like whatever, if you're, it's, if you're inclined to do so, but that's probably what would be best. And so I, was a little bit, not doing my normal routine because, I don't know, so I, this morning, so I ended up looking at comments, which I usually don't do till later. And I don't know why, like I just kind of was in a daze, and, and I, the meditation I had this morning was good, and I connected, there's just intense energy, like gathering like energy. And, I, got these comments, and I'm going to read them in the order that I read them, not in the order they came in. And so 47 minutes before I opened up the computer, so about it, an hour and a half ago, the person wrote, "To be honest, what's the real reason you don't want the Bible to be true?" And so, I don't have when I read comments, I have no idea what you're talking about. Like if somebody quotes me, I often don't know that you're quoting me. But it's good that people do that if they think there's something, because it's a possible thing that if I ever get back to merch, I would maybe consider, like if something, it's good, that people do that. But when people are like all mad at me or hostile or whatever. So the video was, wow, Beatty says when the gates of hell will be opened, as they surely will, which is, what Beatty said, and which is really effed up, thing to say, which I covered in the last bunch of videos. But the person wrote, "Be honest, what's the real reason you don't want the Bible to be true?" And then, so that was, it says 47 minutes ago. Then 52 minutes ago, the person wrote this. "First, you gladly believe in Star Wars, but the Bible is just too much. Never fails to amuse me." And the third one was 54 minutes. It was a wholly different era on the planet, bro. And the words in there have been proven false. And 0 words in there have been proven false. 0. And so this person wrote that comment 54 minutes ago, and then thought of another zinger, which was, "You gladly believe in the Star Wars, but in the Bible is just too much. Never fails to amuse me," 52 minutes ago. And be honest, what's the real reason you want the Bible to be true? And they're having a complete, and I'm in a totally different state. I just, like I said, I didn't have a relationship with my, mother-in-law. We've had a few dinners and things, There's no, we weren't close. But my wife's, my wife's, process or whatever she's going through, and in fact, it's an intense time here, right? It's been an intense like month, and things are going on. So, like, these comments are like, I want to address them, but some person is completely triggered about something that means zero to me. I don't care about it at all. Like, in, my thing that I do is an extension of my Christianity, my Catholicism, my religious relationship with God. My mom was the centerpiece of religion for me. My mom was very devout Catholic. She ended up doing the meditation for a while. And her, I was in India when I found out she died. And these women who were, who were the only people who knew her, they were Haitian women, really sweet women, just nice, like saintly, just, you know, really just sweet people, especially the preceptor that my mom used to go for sittings, right? And so, like, when she died, I had this spiritual thing with it, right? It was like a thing that was, you know, when I was made a preceptor, I had thoughts about my mom, and like tears welled up in my eyes, like these things. And we weren't close, but she was a spiritual person. And then I got back to America from India. That's in 2000. That was in 1993. She started doing the meditation, and so, I just realized my parents were in their 50s, in their 60s when I was in like senior high school. My dad retired from his work like a year or two after I graduated high school. He must have been 65 when he retired. And so when I was growing up, my parents were in their 40s and 50s. Like, when am I, like, I knew they were old, but I never really knew exactly how old. It occurred to me that, I was like, well, my parents were kind of old. They were really old. They were in their 90s when they died. And, and that was in 2012-ish time. Like, I was in India in 2014. My mom died. And so, 15, like, just on the cusp. It might have been 2015. That was like, either December 2014 or January 2015. It was, whatever it was. And my dad had died like maybe a year earlier, year and a half before that, in 2013 or something, 2012, I don't know. And so, and they were in their 90s, and I'm like, they must have been really old when I was in like high school. I was just trying to piece these things together because I had no consciousness of it. But anyway, let's get back to the comments. And so this person's triggered, and I don't know what I said about the Bible, but it is a bad book. I mean, for say that it's wholly different era on the planet, bro, and 0 words in there have been proven false. 0. Well, like, I would say 70 to 80% of the Bible, like, I would say, I'd have to read the thing, but I would say almost the whole Old Testament. And then, lots of things that have been twisted, or, it's not so much about like necessarily being false. Like, the Old Testament's just, the whole approach to God is false. And again, I don't care if people can't see it. So the first part about this is, you get plenty of channels out there where they are, people who are talking. It's not necessarily the channel. Like, there's Christian channels. There's people who just talk about the Bible, and it's, preaching, and there's all that, right? And I don't know how many people are even into that, even Christians, like, just, really over the top, kind of really, I mean, most people could read their Bible. Like, how many Christians read their Bible regularly or at all? They go to, church, and, your church, whatever, in Sunday Mass, you go to church, and there would be, a sermon, and there would usually be some biblical quote, like a line or two, and then a sermon about that, or so, one of the teachings. And, it's a hard book to read because of the language. I mean, so it's not in its original language, which is problematic, which I've said. It's been translated. Even if it was just translated once, but it's been translated multiple times. So it was written in various languages because each disciple wrote in whatever language they spoke the best, right? Some of the disciples spoke in Hebrew, and some of it's in Aramaic. So it says here the Old Testament was written primarily in Hebrew, and small portions were written in Aramaic, and the New Testament was written in Koine Greek, which is a common language of the Eastern Mediterranean world at that time. So they were speaking Greek there, Jesus and those folks. And so, we're talking about the original Old Testament was written 3,000 years, the when the Bible that was, again, so this was, the Old Testament of the Bible was written 3,000 years before Jesus, right? So what Jesus was given as a kid, there was no New Testament, right? So was taught the Old Testament, right? So it's like they're two separate things. And so the misunderstanding of the Christians and the Christian religion is that, this is, whatever happened, like there's, anything that's 2,000 years old or 3,000, 5,000 years is suspect, it's never going to be a clean representation of the story. It just can't be. Like the books don't survive and they don't age well. People change dramatically. And so, whatever he was taught, the stuff that he was taught, there's some rendition of that that's now called the Old Testament. And it's called, there's something else that it's called in the Jewish religion. And so there might be some differences there, but the ideas are basically the same. The book of Genesis, these books. And Jesus was given this religion, but he did what I did, and so many of us have done. Anybody who does the Sahaj Marg method has done, which is he transcended his religion. This guy Swami Vivekananda said that a religion is a great thing to be brought up in, but a horrible thing to die in. That you transcend your religion. Religions are there for children to be taught the basic idea of God. And, some religions are better than others, but they are not spiritual. They are religions. They are, again, just there for you to get the bare sort of understanding of what's going on with, like morals and ethics, and that there is God and these things. But the religion is also a structure of like worship or whatever. But at some point you become a spiritual person where you have a direct connection with the divinity within you. And that's what Jesus did. He was born a Jew and then he became something else. He wasn't a Christian. There was no Christian religion. It was a spiritual movement when Jesus was alive. And it was dynamic because he was, he embodied the condition, the spiritual condition of the essence of, the Christ that was in him, like Jesus the Christ, right? It's like the master, right? There's some level of mastery there. And so, he was a living embodiment of somebody who is connected to the divinity within him. And so I know this because I've been able to transcend my religion and be on a spiritual path. And regardless of how good I am and, comparatively to someone like that or any saint, it's not, there's no grading of that stuff, right? Some people are going to excel more than others. You can't you don't compare things. It's just everybody who does that, everyone who facilitates a relationship with the divinity within them and then keeps it going because, people quit. Like people quit too hard. They're on the spiritual path, right? But when you do that, when you transcend your religion and you rise to a higher level of connectivity with the divinity within you, and you no longer have the middleman, which is the religion between you and God, then you are, on a higher level of consciousness. You just are. There's no, from day one, sure, it's going to grow over time. It's going to change over time. You're going to understand things more and more. It's not like you're not going to be an expert on day one. But when you make that decision, it's not even just a decision. It's like a way of life. And switch is thrown. and you start to connect and feel a relationship with the divinity within you. The one teaching that stands out in the New Testament is the kingdom of heaven is within. And there is a spirit world. There is there's more than just one. There's these etheric worlds, these etheric realms of existence that are beyond the material existence, right? They're beyond the material plane of existence. And once you connect with that, whatever you're doing, it's I mean there's different methods and there's different reasons for doing it, but the thing that I'm talking about is where you're facilitating a connection with the divinity within you. So that's your soul, and your soul is connected to God. So it's a multifaceted type of relationship. You're now you're subject to information and instructions and guidance from above and beyond and inside and these things, right? And from another realm of existence. You're connecting to the reason why you're here. Your soul has a purpose, and your soul guides you, and you're developing your heart as an instrument to feel God's love, and it helps to guide you to make decisions and understand things. And it's just, it's like anything else. The longer you do it, the better you get at it. But like I've said so many times, Master Charji, of the third master of the system, has this wonderful, teaching. It was one of the first things I read, that the lowest part of the higher, which is the spiritual, the lowest part of the higher, is still highest than the highest part of the lower, which is the material. So you can be the richest person on earth, you could be the greatest person in terms of like anything, scholar or athlete, or you can achieve greatness and be on the realm where you're living a completely privileged life, where you're in the upper echelon of success, or mental genius, or any number of things, right? But that still is the best people, the most accomplished people, the most successful people are still lower in terms of them still being embedded and engaged in the material existence. And they can also be spiritual, right? Some of these people who are successful can also connect with the divinity within them, but often they don't, because they're too engaged in their material process. They don't have time, and they don't have the inclination, and they're too happy, and they're too, focused on the material. But they can be. They can also be spiritual. But again, in the case of this teaching, if you are just a material person and you're a great one, you're famous, you're successful, you're accomplished, it's still lower than the person who's like a homeless person who has an active relationship with the divinity within them, because you're entering a new realm of consciousness where you're now engaged with, people have moments where they flirt with this, but I'm talking about, a process where there's, you're on your spiritual path and your spiritual journey. And once you've entered onto this journey and, you get some experience doing it, you start understanding and seeing things on a whole different level. That's why people come to my channel, because, some of the reasons. It refines you, and it makes you better at everything. It makes you more insightful about everything. It just does. And so there's lots of reasons not to be on the spiritual path. It's hard. It's, most people who enter onto it. There was some guy who wrote a book. He was, he didn't do what I did, but something, similar. And he became a higher developed soul. He said most people stumble onto the spiritual path, and they don't really belong there. And it's just they're over their head. But it's something that it's ultimately a good thing. And so when you are coming from that level of understanding, I've been doing this over 30 years. Like, I understand the Bible better than somebody who isn't. Like, I understand all these books. I understand the life of Jesus better than they do. Whether they're the best Christian and they're good at, they know the Bible, they read it all the time. Like, I understand it. Like, I'm seeing it from a totally different level of consciousness, because I've done this, and it's not like a bragging thing. It's just reality. Like, it's just what is. Like, anybody who's actively engaged in a spiritual process understands other spiritual journeys, what other people have gone through from a different perspective. And you also have a relationship with God. And so when you read something, God is reading it with you. Like when I see something, this is when I experience life, especially when I get into a more spiritual state, like when I pick up the microphone, like I get into more like a meditative state, the divinity is participating in your assessment of something and you're getting feedback. It's like, when I ask a question of this, AI technology, whatever Gemini I'm doing, like I just asked about the Bible, it's like having, an Ethernet, like a connection to the spiritual world inside of you that also has a reaction to your life and experiences. And when you get into a meditative state, you reflect and you get information and feeling and, and intuition and things. You get all these responses. It's like a dog, when their sense of smell is so important and they're able to gather so much information from smelling things, right? Like it's that's a sensory experience. Like you have with your visual eyes when you see something, it's different, right? When you smell something, it's different than seeing it. Like if you see a picture of a war-torn place, it's brutal. You see a video, it's brutal. Like you see a devastated city, and you see carnage, and you have dead bodies or whatever it is, or something, whatever you might see, you have a reaction. But if you're actually there and you're seeing it with your own eyes and you're smelling it and you're hearing the sounds and people wailing and it's a difference. It's a different experience being there, and the energy, the energy that's there. You can't really feel the energy when you're watching a video, like you can, but not nearly like you can if you were there. The energy of the grief that is there, that people that are exuding a place that just got hit by a bomb or multiple bombs, and all the fear and the anger and the grief and things that are in the atmosphere. Like you can just feel the energy, the consciousness of the people, because you're there with them and you're experiencing that personally, right? That's the things you're feeling, but you don't. When you're not there, you don't have it, and that's all sensory. On a spiritual level, it's something different. It's more refined. And so the problem with the Old Testament, and this speaks to a whole religion and half of Christianity and whatever part of the Muslim religion that has, they all share this original story. And I don't know how the Muslim treat like the book of Genesis or something. Like, I don't know. Like, they both come from the same area with the same understanding, and there's, some shared information with Christianity, with Judaism, and with Islam, like, because they're all connected. They're all coming out of the same tree, right? Like the Hindu religion's responsible for Buddhism and a number of other religions. In fact, all religions. There's things in the Hindu religion which are also in Judaism, because Hinduism came first. The discovery of a soul that happened in India, some 200,000 years ago, and the consciousness of a soul. And so that was taken from them, right? That was, not taken, like people just, that's where that came from. And people at that time, Jesus' time, also believed in past lives and these other things, because there was a connection. They're close to each other, right? That region of the world, India and the Middle East, are responsible for, most of these, most of the religions that exist. And, Jesus visited India. There's evidence that he visited India. I believe 100% he did. And he learned, that's where he learned his stuff and brought it back to where he told his disciples. He was teaching things that he learned. It's a form of yoga. I forget which one, but like he obviously did something, because there's connection between his teachings and some of these other yogic teachings, right? So there's all these things, and all these things that have been erased and have been edited out and changed in 2,000 years and 5,000 years, right? But the essence of the Old Testament, God is a real narcissistic prick, and he's a king and all these things. And I explained this over and over again. And so it's a misrepresentation of God. It's a very, God's more of a demon in the Old Testament, who was angry and like I said, narcissistic and vengeful and petty and jealous. God doesn't get jealous. God, like a bad king gets jealous. They're talking about really some bad king. And like I said, the highest level of person was a king, right? When people thought about greatness, they thought about a king. And so God was represented as a king to these people. Like, there's violence in this region. There's like war. These were very warlike people, very tribal. And, Yahweh was this cry of Yahweh, and there was all this brutality, like where God ordered the Jewish people to just wipe people out, right? And kill people. There's just a very violent, and again, it's God is misrepresented. If God, that's not God that's in the Old Testament. A wrathful, vengeful, mean, petty, just immature, like just kind of like a bitch, right? Like it's just like some little rich little bitchy little king who's constantly getting mad at his people and punishing them because they're not doing his bidding properly, right? If they're not, this is a bad king, and so it's not an actual representation of God. You don't learn anything about God reading the Old Testament. Like it's just a piece of shit book. It's like worthless. It's it teaches you nothing about divinity. It's all about like it's a very heavy and dense. It's like kind of like a treatment plan for criminals. Thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not kill. Like it's just bare basic shit, right? Like why? Like why should we not steal and kill? Like so these people are. It's like dealing with criminals. It's telling criminals, hey, stop stealing, stop killing. Let me read these things to you. Honor your father and mother. Well, like what? Because you wouldn't, like so. And of course, now in our modern day time, people don't honor their father and mother. But like that's because we're shitty people, right? Like you should do that. You should not bear false witness against your neighbor. You know, that should like don't lie about your neighbor. Like so what kind of piece of shit are you, right? Remember to keep the holy. Remember to keep the Lord's holy day. Again, so that's people wouldn't do that. What are you doing on the day that's not holy, right? You shall not murder. Like you're talking to murderers. These are people who are murderous. You have to say that. Like these are rules that they have to say because everything that's being said here is what people were doing, right? Thou shalt not commit adultery. Obviously keep the Sabbath holy. Shall not make false idols. You shall not covet. Jealousy, other people's stuff. Thou shalt not steal. Thou shalt not kill. You shall have no other gods. You shall not give false testimony. And so these are all like piece of shit things that piece of shit people do, right? Like, like these are like rules you could have up at a prison cell. Yeah, don't kill, don't steal, don't lie about don't bear false witness, don't lie about your neighbor, don't do these things, right? And so they're not like higher level spiritual teachings. It's just like well, these are the things that will you just bare minimum to be a human being, like rules that you have to live by. Like most of these things you should know already that they're wrong and you shouldn't do them. Like there's no sophistication here. This is just lower level stuff, right? So the Old Testament is just a bad book. It's a remedial book, and it has no bearing on a spiritual path, because like a spiritual person knows that all these things are wrong. Just on a heart level, you feel it. Like you just won't do these things. You feel bad about doing them, right? Lying, manipulating, cheating, stealing, killing. All the things, right? All the bad things that people do. Like you shouldn't need to be told these things. Like when you enter the spiritual field, you should already know that every one of these things is wrong, and that you should do what's right. In the Sahaj Marg system, there's 10 maxims, and they're higher principles. They're higher level of they're higher. Here, I'll go ahead and read them. I got to pull them up here. The first one is rise before dawn, offer your prayer and puja at the fixed hour, preferably before sunrise, sitting in the one and same pose. Have a separate place and seat for worship. Purity of mind and body should be especially adhered to. And so, first of all, the maxims are all stated in what you should do. The 10 commandments are thou shalt not this, thou shalt not that, don't do this, don't do that, right? These things. And the maxims are worded positively because doing something, your mind works better when you're not focused on the negative. When you're doing something instead of not doing something. So what you should do, right? So this is about what you should do. It's higher level because you're supposed to, those other things you're supposed to know already, right? Don't kill, don't, do these things, don't covet, don't, any of these things, don't be jealous, all these hatred and jealousy and all these things. Like you're not supposed to be that way. And so it's not like don't do that because you should already know. So these are the things that help you not do those things, right? And so the first maxim is about how if you meditate in the same place, and it's good to have a separate place, a place, specifically for meditation, like a chair that you use just for meditation, right? And if you have that and you meet God there every day at the same time. And so, in the Sahaj Marg system, you're supposed to get up before dawn because it's best time to meditate. And again, these things are always not doable, but it's the ideal. And meditate the same day. And then, have an attitude where you're, this thing of being pure, purity of mind and body should especially be adhered to. You're meditating on God, not other things, right? Not mundane stuff. Like it's going to creep into your meditation, but you attend to you don't attend to these negative thoughts or thoughts that are of your material life, and you focus just on God. Your mind's going to wander, and you're going to have these thoughts that you treat like uninvited guests. You get forceful with them, but you don't attune to them or attend to them. You're trying to ignore them like they come and they just whatever. And so that's the first maxim. Let me see. I think I'll pull this back up. Second one is begin your puja with a prayer for spiritual elevation with a heart full of love and devotion. So when you're doing the meditation, you do this prayer and the mission prayer, and then you have, you do it with like a heart full of love and devotion where you're feeling God's love, right? So there's, you're doing it with enthusiasm, like you're grateful to be able to connect to God, like you're waking up going, oh my God, I get to connect to God, like you're enthusiastic about it, right? Fix up your goal, which should be complete oneness with God. Rest till this ideal is achieved. And so the idea behind the system is you're connecting to God. And you have this goal and you're aware of the goal. And like everything that you're doing in life is a part of that goal. And like that's, again, these things you're working on these things constantly. They're your work in progress. And the fourth one, be plain and simple to be identical with nature and be truthful. And again, we're wording this positively, right? So if you're plain and simple to be identical with nature and you're truthful, then you don't do all these other things like that maxim alone. If you do those things, then you're not going to kill. You're not going to covet. You're not going to be jealous. You're not going to be, if you're being truthful, you're not going to bear false witness against your neighbor. You're not like all those 10 commandments are covered in this one positive statement, right? You see the difference, right? The difference between the 10 commandments, don't do this, don't do that, you piece of shit criminal. You born sinner, you piece of shit. I know you want to kill somebody. I know you want to covet your neighbor's wife. I want to, all these things, right? Number 5, take miseries as your divine blessings for your own good and be thankful. And this is like one of the more sophisticated teachings, where things are, take miseries as your divine blessings. So like most people, when you have a misery, you're like, fuck you, God, what are you doing to me? Like, why this or whatever. Oh, poor me, this is freaking horrible, this misery. Why am I, you're a victim. And, people then feel justified to do bad things. Oh, this is my life sucks and I'm going to make other people miserable, right? And so, you're having miseries as divine blessings, and you take them as for your own good and be thankful. Like that's a complete different way of approaching difficulties. Like God is giving me this thing, and the teachings behind this. Then he wrote a commentary, Babaji, the Second Master, of all the reasons behind this. What happens on a spiritual level, and they're just kind of brilliant, and they're almost hard to understand when you first they are hard to understand when you first read them. But what happens spiritually, the spiritual science behind this, that, these miseries are actually cleaning your samskaras and your things that are blocking you from connecting to God. And they're part of your, your soul's path and your soul's plan. And so when these things happen to you, you have an opportunity to rise to a higher level. And so if you're fixing up your goal, which would be complete oneness with God and rest not till the ideal was achieved, then when you have these obstacles, it's an opportunity to do that, right? Like it's an opportunity to connect to God in a deeper and deeper ways. And so the explanations behind these maxims are like fascinating. There's a whole book about it, the 10 Maxims of Sahaj Marg. Know all people. There's a PDF file that people can get and read them, right? It's like you just search 10 Maxims of Sahaj Marg PDF, and the book will come up. There's two books. There's the original Sahaj Marg, the Sahaj Marg one, which actually isn't as good because they use Scribe. And then there's the one from Babaji's kids. They had their own, just kind of bullshit one, but their book is actually easier to use on the internet. Know all people as their brethren and treat them as such, right? Well, when you have this idea that all people are your brothers and sisters, which is what, as I say in the beginning, this is the idea behind it, that we're all children of God. And, lots of people are assholes and miserable people, but, deep down, below that, we all have a soul and we're all children of God. No matter what people's personalities are, deep down, we all have the same essence. Number 7, be not revengeful for the wrongs done by others. Take them with gratitude as heavenly gifts. The teaching behind this maxim is brilliant. Like he talks about how when your soul comes down, it's in a pristine condition. And God wants it to return to that. So as you develop these samskaras and these mistakes and your personal choices, your soul gets encompassed with grosser and grosser things. Like you're no longer your soul is no longer pure. It's like it's wrapped around by this, it's like it's like thread. You do a ball of thread. There's all these things that you've added on, grosser levels of that aren't a part of the pristine essence of your soul. And so these things have to be burned off in the form of what's called boga, experience. You have to like burn these things off and cleanse yourself of the choices you made in the past and these impressions that you've created over lifetimes. And so when that happens, oftentimes it's a misery as divine blessing, and a lot of times it's a person doing something bad to you, and it activates a process in which some of this stuff gets burned off. So when somebody does something bad to you, it actually helps you spiritually. And I've experienced this. And does that mean the person's a good person? No, but like there's some level of understanding that they're doing you service, even though they're doing something wrong to you. They're helping you evolve spiritually. So it's a complete different way of looking at it, right? Somebody wrongs you and you're like, I hate that person sucks. And then you just create more negative, grossness that blocks your connection to the divinity within you. But if you take it as like, oh, wow, so this is going to burn off some samskaras, and it's going to help me connect to God, this going back to this, fix up your goal, which should be the complete oneness with God, it's going to help you do that. So you have this misery, you have this, negative person. Be not revengeful for the wrongs done by others. Take them with gratitude as heavenly gifts, because they're actually rendering you service, even though, like, you would never look at it that way, right? You would look at it like this person's fucking doing something horrible to me. Number 8, be happy to eat in constant divine thought whatever you get with due regard to honest and pious earnings. That you work with this attitude of, honest and pious earnings. You work with this attitude of, that your job is participating in society and you're doing this work for God. And so you're not cheating, you're not lying, you're working as you're doing your job, you're performing your service, whatever it is. You have a role in society. And so this service that you're doing, God's blessed you with this opportunity to serve and do work, and that you're receiving, your compensation, which is coming from a divine process, not some, like, again, like getting all this stuff in the 10 commandments that you would do wrong, cheating, lying, stealing, right? Instead of doing those things, you work for God and you participate in God's world by contributing to God's planet, God's creation, right? And so then you receive this compensation, and with that compensation, you buy food, right? So you have, you have food that comes from, doing a good job for God, right? You have a pure job, like in terms of, your job might suck, but the way you go about it, you might have some just mundane job, but you're working with the idea that you're serving other people because the other people have divinity within them, right? And you're serving, whatever it is, right? You're participating in society, and you have this attitude, like it's looking at your job as that God's giving you this job, and you're doing this work for God, right? Then you receive this compensation, and so then when you eat the food, you're grateful. God's giving you this food. God's provided me this food. You're eating in gratitude, and so then you're thinking about the food. Like when Babaji ate, he thought that every particle of the food was God. It was part of God. It was divine. It was natural, divine. Everything has God in it. And every particle of the food was going into his body and divinizing his body and his system because he was eating divine food given from divinity, and it was making his system divine. And so if you're doing that, then instead of just like wolfing down, unhealthy foods, or whatever like people do, you're thinking about it's a whole process. You're including God in your eating and your digestion, all these things. I did this for a while, like I was really into it. It was helpful. I was focusing on it. Mold your life as to not arouse a feeling of love. Mold your life as to arouse a feeling of love and piety in others. Well, this is a huge thing. I mean, this is, I don't want to say it's hard, but it's something where you would live your life where you would be an inspiration to other people. You would live your life, again, these are a work in progress. Like it's, like I think I'm reading these and thinking about, wow, I should be doing these better, right? Like all of them, I haven't read these in a while. And then again, there's these lengthy explanations about how this works on a spiritual, on like the spiritual level of existence. It's all very interesting. And you can find, like I said, you can find this book. But mold your life as to arouse a feeling of love and piety in others. So if you just did that, then none of the stuff in the Ten Commandments would come into play, right? So this is a positive suggestion. You have a positive goal, something you could do, and that you're trying to, you're working towards being an example to other people and helping them, look at you. When they look at you, they're like, oh, wow, I got to do better. Not out of a sense of jealousy, but in a sense of, look at how, much service and work and things this person's doing. And the last one, at bedtime, feeling the presence of God, repent for the wrongs committed, beg forgiveness in a supplicant mood, resolving not to allow repetition of the same. And so this starts off with rise before dawn. And then you go through the various, your day with all the other maxims, like all the other things are things you might deal with during your day. And then at night, you get into a prayerful mood, a meditative mood. And you think about things that, you might have not done to your highest level, like any of these things that are there during the day, right? Like any of these other things any of these other maxims or anything. So, like I didn't, any regrets you might have during the day, like mistakes you made. And, it's not something you dwell on your mistakes. Again, this is not a negative thing. It's a positive thing. And so you've made a mistake and you beg for forgiveness in a supplicant mood, like in a mood where you're being submissive, to God, like, God's your master and your soul to some extent. Like you're saying, please forgive me, and then make a will that you won't do the same thing over again, that I'm not going to do this over again. And so it's a way to deal with mistakes, right? And where you're connecting to God, say, I'm admitting, I knew I did this wrong. I knew I made a mistake here. And so please forgive me. And, you're asking, it's implied that you're asking for help. You're now connecting to God and making sort of like an oath or a pledge to not do it again. With God being a part of it, like God helping you, with your weaknesses or whatever it might be. And so it's a way of dealing with, things that are getting in your spiritual path, tendencies. Of course, there's a cleaning process and these other things. So you see the difference, right? There's a significant difference. One thing is, telling you things that most people know they're not to do. And it's, like a set rules that you could put up in a prison cell. the Ten Commandments, and this other thing is positively worded statements with also an extensive explanation of how this works for you spiritually and how to deal with all these difficulties that you're going to endure. And then ultimately, all these things lead to gratitude, like I say at the end of my videos, right? And so, if this person's saying, let's get back to their comment here. I mean, oh, it's on, here it is. And so I haven't did a screenshot. It's on my browser. It was a wholly different era on the planet, bro. Again, like this was the first comment, so I would have no idea what this person talking about, and zero words in there have been proven false. Zero, and then I'd kind of understand this is the Bible. Had I read this comment, if this was the only comment, or had I read this comment first, that they're reacting to something I said about the Bible. But there's so much false stuff in the Bible, and the fact that you can't see it is sad. For me, it's like when when I was a little kid, I liked the Old Testament better because the Old Testament had stories, and the New Testament was abstract teachings that, of course, it's very dense and very hard to read because, it started off in Hebrew and Aramaic and in Greek, and then was translated to Latin and then to English. And so, and then multiple translations and edits and all these things. But then, the Bible was, the King James Bible and these other various forms were written in old style English, right? And so it hasn't been put in modern day English, and a lot of things wouldn't translate. So, it's not it hasn't aged well, and it's hard to read that kind of a language, right? Thou shall not, thou shall, these things, right? These various you know, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal, these things. Just the word thou, like we don't use the word thou anymore. And so, um, whenever there's translation, it doesn't get translated purely, and there's different forms of the Bible. There's the King James version. There's the, if you look at the Bible Hub, whenever I, deal with this, I go to the Bible Hub, and they show you the different teachings, and there's, they're the same. They're the same part of the Bible. They're the same passage in the Bible, and yet the teachings are different. Like the words are different. The sentences are different. They use, it's quite significant changes. And so, which one's the right one? The one that you read, the one that you think is the right one, or is it, which is the real one, right? Because they say different things, right? But anyways, when I read the Bible as a kid, I thought the Old Testament was better because it had stories in it, and it was like there was things, there were interesting stories. But then when my ex read it to my kids for homeschooling, read the Old Testament of the Bible, and I sat in for it because I was interested in it, we were all like, "Oh my God, this is horrible." The way that God is being presented, because I had now evolved to be a spiritual person, and I had adult level consciousness, and my kids had been raised with an understanding of God as the essence of divine love, not the God sitting on a throne somewhere as a king. And so it's very remedial teachings. And I don't care if you can't get it. Like I'm not like, there's no judgment. I understand that people can't. That people can't live a spiritual life. They're just not ready. And they need very remedial religions. And that's all they can do. But, at least you should know there's a higher level of consciousness. And, it's sad that people can't see that there's, the Old Testament's like bullshit and the New Testament's like just kind of good. It's like, it's spirituality or it's religion 101. Just bare basic concepts about God. It's not that great of a book. It's not, even the good parts. There's more sophisticated teachings out there in so many different, you just have to open up to them, right? Like if this is all that you've experienced and you've been told and indoctrinated, this is the end all, it's sad because there's so much more out there. And so the next comment, you gladly believe in Star Wars, but the Bible is just too much, never fails to amuse me. So now the person's mocking me like they're so much better than me, like, and it's sad, like it's pathetic because, I don't believe in Star Wars. Like I know Star Wars is a movie. I believe that, extraterrestrials, there's life outside of this earth, but that's whatever that is. But the Bible itself, like I have real reasons, which I explained to you, that I have a deeper understanding of spiritual life because I've done this spiritual path and I'm, you're experiencing this on a different level than you are as a religious person. And so it's like you have no idea. It's like you're in a two-dimensional world, and you have no idea there's a third-dimensional world, right? It's like that level of difference. Like you have no idea, right? It's like you've eaten vanilla ice cream your whole life, and you're like, it's the best ice cream. Have you eaten anything else? No. No. Have you tried any other flavors? No. Have you tried frozen yogurt? No. Any of these things. And then you're like, but it's just the best. And everyone else like, no, there's like other shit out there that's better. And then you go and you try something else. You're like, holy shit, there's so much better than vanilla. And so, you know, be honest. What's the real reason you don't want the Bible to be true? So again, this was the first one I read. And it was like the third comment in, and I was just in a different mood, and I'm not. I don't usually look at the comments. So there's one, two, three, three, four. This was the fourth comment. And I'm just sort of scanning through, and I'm like, somebody's upset, and I'm like, this probably were more comments before this, right? So this person's going through their own little pissy fit because I've said something, and it represents a truth that they don't want to deal with because all they hear is the opposite. So, you have the Christian channels, the people who believe in the Bible, and they're taking it verbatim. You have that stuff, and then you have people who are pissed at Christianity, who hate Christianity. Either they never did it, or they're people who grew up in a Christian religion and they're rebelling against it, and they talk shit about it, and they say Jesus didn't exist, and any of these things, right? And so you have people who are doing a different religion or have a problem with Christians. So those are the two ways that people would talk about it. Like, there's a lot of people who don't care. They're Christians who don't really care about Christianity. They don't read the Bible. They identify as Christians, but they're not really into it. And then you have people who are, they're not sure, and they're not focused on God. They're lost. They kind of maybe believe in it, but they don't really, and they don't know. And so those people don't talk about this because it doesn't mean anything. So the people who talk about it are people who are really into it, or people who are really mad about it. People who dislike Christians and people who are really into Christianity. But I'm neither of those things, and it's hard for people to deal with this because I believe, first of all, I have a positive relationship and experience with the Catholic religion. I grew up going to church, and I, didn't love it, because it's uncomfortable, the pews, and, it's not really spiritual. And I was a little kid, and it was restless, but I went. And then my parents started to have prayer meetings. My mom, we had nuns and people over the house, and then my mom started this charismatic, I don't know what it was, Catholic or Christian aspect of. It was more active. It was more of a spiritual. It was more connecting. And I attended some of these things when I was like 12, 13 years old. I went with my mom, and I chose to go there, and I was into it, right? And so, I don't have any complaints, and all these people prayed for me. Like people at the prayer meetings, my mom, my grandmother did the rosary, and those prayers helped me. Prayers work. So I'm grateful for my Catholic upbringing. I have no issues. I have no complaints. I spent 1 year in a Catholic school. It was, with nuns, and it was good. The nuns no one beat me with the nuns that beat kids with the ruler. I didn't have any of those experiences. I had a good experience with it. And I stopped doing it. I got a concussion. I started smoking pot. I started to drink. And I just faded away. I caught my parents lying. And so I was like, you're doing this religious thing, and you're lying to me. Like, just, I mean, it's one of the commandments, right? But, and it was over silly things. And they didn't have to lie. But, I also was smarter than my parents, and I saw through, like, their incompetence. And, I was 14, and I just had no respect for my parents because of they were both, incompetent. My dad, maybe more than my mom. Okay, so my voice started to go, so I went to eat breakfast. And that's my son he's out at a job interview, and he's wanted to buy flowers for my wife, which she's not into flowers so much, but she's going to get a lot of them. But, I'm encouraging him to do so just so he gets in the habit of, like thinking about things this way. So he came up with that on his own. But anyways, so I ate breakfast. I want to take this in a different direction. It's already kind of long, but let me just wrap what I was saying. When I was a teenager, I lost respect for my parents. And, you start seeing through your parents, which every kid does. And that included their belief in, religion. And my mom was so incompetent and worried. She was good religious person, but she struggled in life, with confidence, and she worried too much, and the lying, when having you get caught lying as a parent, that's never good. This thing that happens. But in terms of like, you know, my relationship to the Bible or any of these things, there was no conscious decision. Like there was nothing with the Christian religion or the Catholic religion that I was bummed about. I just wasn't doing it. Like I wasn't into it anymore. Like many people, like you're like when you're a kid, you think your parents are great. Your parents are gods. Their parents are. You have no. You don't see through their issues. Like when you're a little kid, you don't really have the capacity. Even when your parents do stupid things or whatever, you just like you're just you're predisposed to think your parents are to follow your parents and they're taking care of you or whatever. And then you start questioning things as you get into your preteens and your teens and things. And oftentimes it's also the religion. And the Christian religion, the Bible, the organizations themselves, they can't stand scrutiny. Like if you start to scrutinize them, then they are just filled with hypocrisy, and they're actually the opposite. They're actually working as a middleman to block your connection to God. And so it doesn't stand up to you questioning it. Like this person has never questioned it, right? But has questions because they're upset that I'm questioning it. They're upset that I've evolved past it. So going back to this comment, be honest, what's your real reason you don't want the Bible to be true? Like they're just on a so lower level of consciousness about this, right? Like that's their thing. Like it's not, what do you mean I don't want it to be true? Like what are you talking about? I'm talking about shit that isn't true. I'm scrutinizing the Bible the same way I scrutinize Joe Biden or Trump. It's like people who say, they like the way that I assess and my interpretation of what Joe Biden is, but they can't stand my interpretation of Trump. But it's the same. I'm doing the same work. I'm using my same abilities. It's that you're changing. Like it's coming from you, right? You see that I have insight when I'm talking about Joe Biden, but like you can't stand it when I do apply the same abilities to Donald Trump. Like it's the same thing with the Bible. Like I'm just doing what I do for everything else, based on my knowledge and experience. And it's clear, like to anybody who's on is not indoctrinated by it. If anybody reading this shit in there, right? Like you could read other weird shit in the in the Mormon the Mormon Bible or whatever they have, whatever the book is, right? There's weird stuff in there, and you can hear about some of the stuff that they do, or any other religion. There's weird shit in every religion, and it's easy to see it when it's not yours, So you've never questioned it, you've never looked at it, and it's kind of imperative that you do if you really want to be a truther. But you might not have the ability to do that, and that's fine. Then you probably shouldn't be here. There's so many Christian channels, but how many channels are able to talk about the Bible the way I do? Have you heard anybody else talk about it? Because they're not coming from a spiritual perspective, and they don't have, like I, have a respectful, relationship with Jesus because he's a part of the Sahaj Marg system. His soul is, and I'm grateful for my, my upbringing as a Catholic. Like it paved the way for me to become a spiritual person later. So I have no issues with it. Like I'm not anything but grateful for all of it. I don't feel any resentment or hatred or anything, the negative feelings about it. It just sucks. It's just a lower level thing, right? Like I'm not mad about kindergarten, but I'm not going to stay in it, right? Like religion is kindergarten. And so, I mean, if you're stuck in kindergarten, that's, that sucks for you. But if that's all you can do, then keep on doing it, right? It's better than not doing anything at all. It's better having at least some consciousness of the idea of God than not, if you can't evolve to a next level, and most people can't. And the other thing about this is, see, you can't, like these people who get upset, it's silly because who cares what I think, right? If you're so like enamored with your Christian religion and your Bible, and do you even read the Bible? Like how much do you read it? Like, I mean, this person, I don't have a conversation with them, but like they should ask, like, are you really reading it? Do you read it every day? Like, do you read it like once a year, the whole Bible? Do you think about it? What you're reading, do you assess it? Like most people don't read it. Like most people haven't read the whole thing. Like I read it when I was a kid. I don't know if I read the whole thing. I think I did. maybe more than once, but I used to read it, and I didn't understand it. That's why I don't know whether I read the whole thing or not, because like so much of it is written in this weird language, which is you have to interpret it. You need almost a translator because it's written in Old English. And again, most people don't understand it, don't like it. Like, how many people actually pick up their Bible and read it regularly, right? Like, so, like, there's probably 5% of Christians actually read their Bible. And so, I looked up this, it said less than 40% of Christians, and again, would be a hard thing to assess in terms of a study because people would lie about it, right? But it said less than 40% of them read the Bible more than a few times a year. Like, either like Christmas or like, they get upset about something, pick up the Bible, whatever it is. But the majority of Christians, and if you're a Christian, if you identify as a Christian, how much you read the Bible and how much the other people in your family and the people that who are Christians read the Bible. And so maybe you go to church and you listen to a passage here or there, but you don't like, you're not even reading it. Like, you don't even like the book yourself, right? Like, you don't think about the book, read it, and like, what's your favorite part? Like, in terms of, okay, Trump couldn't answer what's his favorite part of the Bible because he didn't know. He doesn't have anything. He claims to be a Christian, but the majority of them don't even have a favorite teaching. And so, why do you think it's the Word of God if you can't even fucking read it, right? If you can't even participate in it, like it's you're lying to yourself. Like and you hear what I say, you get upset, but you're not even reading the fucking thing. And then if you read it, you don't understand it. You're not thinking about it, like the things that it implies, right? There's so many fucked up things in there. What do you read when you read in the Old Testament? And it talks about how God told Abraham to sacrifice his son Jacob, his only son. Or go up into the mountain and kill your son. God says that to him. Like, what the fuck? Like, do you ever question that? No, it's in the Bible. Of course I wouldn't question it. If it's in the Bible, it's got to be good, right? There's multiple animal sacrifices, human sacrifices, God ordering the Jewish people to destroy these groups or another group. David having to cut off foreskins to get a bride, and he doubles down and takes 200 instead of 100. Like, what the fuck, right? Why is cutting dead soldiers' foreskins a part of the Bible? No, it's 100% right. There's no flaws in it at all, because you're not reading it, you're not thinking about it, right? Like, if you read it like an outsider who's reading this book, and you're like, what the fuck is this all about? This doesn't sound like it's about God, because it's not about God. It's not a divine book about divinity and how to connect to God. There's a lot of fucked up shit. It's in the Old Testament, and then a lot of abstract teachings that have been rewritten to indoctrinate you and to, enslave you to a spiritual slavery, religious slavery, where you're indoctrinated into something. If you like, it's a cult where you're told if you don't obey what you're being told, if you don't honor it, you're going to hell. And if you do, you're going to heaven. So it's like this reward. It's some bullshit thing, right? In the Sahaj Marg system, you have to work. Like what I do, you have to work. There's no guarantees or promises of anything. There's no pledge of allegiance to the system. You have to meditate and you have to work on yourself. You have to do those maxims. You have to become a better person. You have to connect with divinity within you. And you have to stay on your spiritual path. And most people can't do it. And I don't care if they do, right? Like, people try it. 1 out of 40 stays. And then there's people after 20 years who love this thing quit. It's a hard thing to stick with. And when people quit, you just don't say anything about it. Like, it's their choice. Because you can't, you can't force people. People have to do it on their own. Like, all 4 of my children tried it. They started, they benefited from it, they grew up in it, and they all rejected it. And we never talk about it. I never had a conversation about it with them. And there's no reason to, because like they know it's an opportunity. I think I've talked to my son about, because he said he started to meditate. I'm like, why don't you do the Sahaj Marg meditation? He wants to do something else. And I'm like, all right, whatever. But it's sad for me. I'm a bummed. Like, I hope my kids would be better than it. Like, it was like I planned for it. Like, it was part of, I believe my kids were being born into my family to do this system, and they chose something else. And like I never say, I don't make it bad for them, right? There's one piece of shit guy. He's a preceptor. I see him. He's in some of Dodgy's videos because he's a part of the organization. And my kids, hung out with his son. His son and daughter were a little bit older than my kids. Nice kids. And I was talking to his son, and his son was like, my dad told me that if I don't do this meditation, I'm not his son. So 6 months, for this kid was funny. Like he was saying as a joke. He goes, for 6 months, I wasn't his son, right? But like that's a fucked up thing. It's totally not Sahaj Marg. Like this guy was we stayed at this guy's house and we said he was a nightmare. Like we had a nickname. There was these two guys that we called Toad 1 and Toad 2. And we stayed at these guys' houses and it was like I couldn't wait to leave. And thankfully we just were able to get out of there because it was horrible. But this guy was, he's not a good example of the system. But the Sahaj Marg system, everyone has to choose to do it. There should be no pressure. There should be no, expectation. You're not doing it for me. I don't want people to do it for me. Because you either are benefiting from it or it's worthless to do. You either feel benefit because it's hard to do. Living a spiritual life is hard to live. And you have to be motivated. You have to be motivated to do those maxims. You have to read the material. You have to meditate. You have to participate in it. And, even if you're doing it a little bit, it's better than nothing. But the only reason I do it is because I've had experiences that show that it's benefiting me on a daily basis. Whenever I do it, like I'm saying this thing with the sitting with my wife, it actually works. It comes through. It's come through for me every time. The method, the system, the connection to God, it's always come through. It always surprises me. It's always better than I thought it was going to be. The organization, yeah, that's crapped out. Dodgy's a piece of shit, right? The whole thing. And some of the people, yeah, they just let me down. They let themselves down, whatever. Not let me down, but they failed to deal with this problem, of a defunct master and like that whole thing. But in terms of the meditation, the cleaning, and the system, it's always been wonderful. It's always been better than expected, better than advertised. That's why I continue to do it, because it fucking works for me, right? Like I don't do things that don't work. Like if I eat food, it makes me sick, that I'm not going to eat it. But something that's beneficial, and even with it being beneficial, people still quit. It's a struggle. It's hard to be on the spiritual path, but it's the reason we're here, and it sucks that human beings struggle with it, but it's just what we do. People are enticed by materialism, especially during the Kali Yuga, and so it's hard to be a spiritual person. So like these people write these things. I mean, it's really about them because they don't know there's something better, and they're not really doing the thing. Very few people who do Christianity really do it. They say they're Christians, but they're not. It's their version of Christianity that they're whatever practice that they're doing that they call Christianity is their own specific one, and they're not doing exactly what the Bible says because they don't read it, and the Bible really doesn't tell you much, right? Most of it's just like, well, this shit's crazy, like if you really read it, well, this doesn't make any sense, right? Because it's written for a different time period. And it's, there's so much better stuff out there. And if you don't like look at it, again, I'm not encouraging people to quit. If it's all you can do, then do it, right? If it's working for you. Some people are being sort of spiritual. There are Christian saints that were the spiritual people that found God inside of them, and they were killed by the religion, right? Because they don't want you to be spiritual. Like think about every Christian saint, every Catholic saint that's been killed by the religion or the powers that be. Like it's fucked up that people in Europe and America kill saints. When someone becomes saintly, they kill them. It's like fucked up, right? Like at least in India, they worship their saints. If somebody becomes a saint, they recognize them and they applaud them, right? Like that's the better part about being in India if you're a spiritual person. And some of these other countries, some of these Eastern countries celebrate somebody who becomes a spiritual person. But in our society, not only do they, go after you and crucify you, but the society's set up so you won't be spiritual. Everything in our system, we're very materialistic. And our religion is very materialistic. So it's all pushing you towards focusing on the material side and not on the spiritual side. Anyways, let's move on to the other introduction here. Okay, so I made 2 other voiceovers today, Thursday, February 20th. And then I'm going to play the voiceover, the 1 or 2 voiceovers, I think it's 1, I made yesterday, and that's just this video is going to be that, and then all of the things, and then I'll get back to the Trump stuff. Okay, so case in point, I received this comment. I was reading through the comments after I was done with this voiceover, and the person says this: one of the oddest things in the Bible is that one guy made fun of was made fun of for being bald by all the kids, and he asked God to smite them, and God sends two bears to rip them kids apart, like dozens of kids. This is what I'm talking about. Like, have you ever thought about that? Like, that's fucked up, but I didn't hear about that. I didn't know that. So I asked the AI bot, and it says here, or I Googled it, and it says, in the Bible, the story of Elijah and the bears appears in 2 Kings 2, and I'll read you the passage in a second. It tells of a prophet who curses a group of boys who mock him for being bald, and the 2 bears come out of the woods and attack the boys. And so here's the actual passage. These things are things that people told me. I knew about some of the fucked up things in the Bible, but the thing with the foreskin, somebody posted on Facebook. And when you hear about these things, you're like, oh, yeah, this is fucked, right? You have to, there's no two ways about it. I mean, unless you're indoctrinated. If you're in a cult, then yeah, sure. He went up from Bethel, and while he was going up on the way, some small boys came out of the city, jeered at him, saying, "Go up, you bald head. Go up, you bald head." And he turned around, and when he saw them, he cursed them in the name of the Lord. And 2 she-bears came out of the woods and tore 42 of the boys. And tore 42 of the boys. From there he went to Mount Carmel, and from there he returned to Samaria. Curses are part of the Mahabharata, and they're always fucked, but the curses played a role in the story. Like things that had to happen in the story, the curses end up playing an important role for the Mahabharata to come out the way it is, right? And, there's no saint cursing some small boys who tease them, right? And that the bears would come out and kill the boys, and that was somehow spiritual. Let me see if I can read the longer version of this thing. The thing about it is that when somebody teases you, like you do the same thing, right? So as a saint, you're supposed to be more tolerant, and you don't pull out the heavy guns for dropping courses and things. And so here it is from King James Bible. "It came to pass that the Lord would take up Elijah into heaven by a whirlwind, that Elijah went from Gilgal, and Elijah said unto Elisha, Tarry here, I pray thee, for the Lord hath sent me to Bethel. And Elisha said unto him, As the Lord liveth, and as thy soul liveth, I will not leave thee. So they went down to Bethel. And the sons of the prophets that were at Bethel came forth to Elijah and said unto him, Knowest thou, Lord, will take him away thy master from thy head day, and say, Yea, I know it, hold ye your peace. And Elijah said unto him, Elijah, tarry here, I pray thee, for the Lord hath sent me to Jericho. And he said, As the Lord liveth, as thy soul liveth, I will not leave thee. So they came to Jericho, and the sons of the prophets that were there at Jericho came to Elijah, and said unto him, Knowest thy Lord will take away thy master from the head day, and answer thee, I know it, ye hold peace. I just thought of something funny, which I'm going to say when we get to that part. And Elijah said, Tarry unto him, I pray thee here, for the Lord hath sent me to Jordan. And he said, As the Lord liveth, as thy soul liveth, I will not leave thee. And the two went on. And 50 men of the sons of prophets went and stood to view afar, and 2 stood by Jordan. Elijah said his mantle and wrapped it together, and smote the waters, and they were divided hither and thither, so that they 2 went over on dry ground. So it seems like that parted the Red Sea, that parted the sea again. And it came to pass, when they were gone over, that Elijah said unto Elisha, Ask what I shall do for thee, before I take it away from thee. And Elisha said, I pray thee, let a double portion of thy spirit be upon me. And then he said, Hast thou asked a hard thing? Nevertheless, if thou see me from when I to taken thee, it shall be so unto thee. But if not, it shall not be so. And it came to pass that they still went and walked, and beheld, there appeared a chariot of fire and horses of fire, parted them both asunder. And Elijah went up to the whirlwind into heaven, and Elisha said it, and cried, my father, the chariot of Israel, and the horsemen thereof. And he said him no more. And he took hold of his own clothes and rent them into pieces. He also took the mantle of Elijah, and say, fall then him back, and stood by the bank of Jordan. And he took the mantle of Elijah and fell from him, and smote the waters, and said, where is thy Lord God of Elijah? And when he also had smitten the waters, they hardened hither and thither, and Elisha went over. Where are we getting to the part where the bears? Oh, here it is. Elijah mocked. And so it says here, the saints, this is going to be a different version. I read a different version of the Bible the first time. I read the bears thing. Thus the saint Lord, I have healed these waters, and they shall not be from thy hence death, a barren land. So I was trying to read this for context, but there is no context because it's kind of like gibberish, right? It's hard to understand. So the waters were healed upon this day, according to the saying of Elisha when he spake. He went up that once unto Bethel, and he was going by the way. There came forth little children out of the city and mocked him, and said unto him, go up thy bald head, go up thy bald head. And he turned back and looked at them and cursed them in the name of the Lord. And there came forth 2 sheep bears from the woods, and tare 42 children of them. And he went hence to the mount of Carmel, and then he hence to return to Samaria. Okay, so there's no context to this thing. Like, I thought there might have been some build-up, like he was having a bad day or some bullshit. Why wouldn't he just pray to God to not to be bald? You know, like if he's upset, and if he's insecure about his baldness, why not say, God, please give me some hair? I mean, the kids were being brats, but shit, like if it's the hair's the problem, right? Why pray so bears? Like, didn't he feel bad when he saw these kids being tearing apart? All they said was, you're bald, right? I mean, it's not, isn't that a little over the top? Like, these little kids are calling him bald, and they're just being little bratty kids. Kids say mean things, right? Because they're disrespectful. You don't set bears on them. Like, I mean, if you went to court and you had a couple of bears and some kids were calling you bald, and you open the cage and you set your bears on them, and the bears killed 40 kids, would you be considered anything but a monster, a serial killer? Like, there'd be movies and shit about you, right? And so, yeah, there's nothing false in this Bible. There's not, all of it's true. There's no bullshit in this book. And so, this is what I'm talking about. Okay, so I'm just gonna put the audio I did yesterday after this one, and I forget what that was about. Like, I just have no clue. But I think it's important. I'm not going to do the Trump stuff here. I'm going to wait till the following day, Friday. There's more stuff coming in now about his, going after Zelensky. So I might as well wait till it's like he's spiraling about Zelensky, or he's strategizing, or whatever Trump does. So that's kind of funny and interesting. And there's a thing with Callie Means going after some CNN doctor shill, which is kind of good. I watched a little bit of that. It's not they're not putting it up on YouTube. It's on CNN, but somebody copied it and put it up on Twitter. But it's not, it's not something CNN wants you to see. So that'll be interesting. So I'll do all that in my next video, which will be out Sunday, whatever, February 21st. And so I just want to add to what I was saying. There's levels to spirituality. There's levels to people's approach to God. And it's the most expansive, like when you're doing martial arts, and there's, the various belts, right? There's a white belt and yellow belt, and then whatever, there's different levels to something, right? Eventually a black belt or whatever it is for any specific genre of martial arts. And then there's the, academic levels of, kindergarten, preschool, elementary school, junior high, high school, college, master's degree, doctorate. And then there's the quality of the teachers and the quality of the education and the quality of the student. Like, not every black belt is, the black belts are going to have different levels of abilities and, in terms of like any kind of expression of something. You're going to have some people who are going to have the same degree, and one person's so much more smarter, so much more evolved. There's always those things. So there's ways that people have of measuring things, and who can do what, and who can get what job, and these kind of things, in the educational system and the rest of it. And there's levels in everything. There's the highest level of player or performer, and then the highest level of teacher and coach, and then something even beyond that, right? There's someone who's the best at something. There's someone who's the best at everything in the world, whether it's being a cook or there's no way to really judge some of these things, but someone's just the best. Like whether they know it or whether everybody knows it or not, they're just the best. They're the person who knows the most about something. They're the best at something. So if you take all the different levels and intricacies of like people's journey into improving themselves and becoming better at something, if you stacked all the different artistry, all the different genres of whatever it is, whether it be school or whether it be martial arts or whether it be instrumental or being a doctor or a healer or all the things that you can be, a parent, a grandparent, all the different roles that people play, a fireman, all the things, every job, every career. You stacked all of the levels. Each one of those things has a spectrum of levels. From being a newbie, like on the entry level position, the first day of your doing that job, the first day of you being a parent or whatever it is, right? And then, the whole journey that someone's on, and then the different levels that people can reach in terms of perfectionism. You think about these people in Cirque du Soleil. I was watching, I think it was at the All-Star game, the NBA All-Star game. They had this older woman, she was an Asian woman, and she's riding a unicycle, and she's throwing cups up on her fucking top of her head. Like she's got 20 cups on top of her head, right? She's throwing like 4 cups at a time on saucers, and they're all landing there, right? And there's things that you see people do, and you're like, how is that even possible? Like, how much practice do they have to put in to achieve this skill, right? Like all that stuff, all the stuff of all the things that humans accomplishment, the mastery level, the highest level, and you put those on top of each other, like on a scale of, all the things human accomplishment. It would be like nothing compared to the levels of a human being's spiritual journey, the vast nature of this human being's spiritual system. There's, in terms of the Sahaj Marg system, there's a spiritual point when activated, and it's, it can be blocked, thankfully, because it would cause chaos, where you can just travel from anywhere in the country to anywhere in the world to just like, you travel through space and time. Like there's shit like there's a point where you can activate it and you don't need to breathe. Like your physical body doesn't need to breathe. There's all these spiritual points. There's infinite amount of spiritual points inside the human system, things that we don't know about, we haven't explored yet, things that can be activated, hidden powers, hidden. There's all these things that people don't even know about. And most of those things are on the very lower level because they have to do with materialism. And then the upper level of real true spirituality it's beyond a person's material life. There's a vast array of the internal universe, the etheric universe is far more vast than the material universe. You think about all the shit that's on human, all the stuff that's on planet Earth, all the different species, all the different rocks, all the different, types of everything. Like there's so many things. It's, like almost, it's not infinite, but it feels like it's infinite. You can never know everything that's on planet Earth. And it's nothing compared to the spiritual realm of existence, right? In terms of what I do, the Sahaj Marg system, there's so many levels in that. There's so much levels of commitment, of work, of, higher developed consciousness. There's people who have more talent and more ability, but then there's people who just work harder. Back when my family and I, my first family, there was no preceptor where we lived. We were in Virginia, near Blacksburg, near Virginia Tech area. And preceptors would travel. There was one guy, he would drive 5 hours from Washington, D.C. He would come up one weekend a month and give everybody, there was people where, my family, there was people in, Roanoke, some of these other people in Blacksburg, in these various areas. There's probably about 15 or 20 Abhyasis. And he'd give them all individual sittings, and then he would go and give a group sitting for everybody at this place. They rented a room in Virginia Tech, and maybe 3 or 4 times a year, there was two different guys in North Carolina who would come up. They would come down from Washington D.C. and up from North Carolina. There's a guy who, when I first went to India, I mean, this guy's just like a saint. Like he's a guy who started my youngest son, and he's in Los Angeles. And I was going to be made a preceptor in India. And I traveled from Massachusetts, drove across the country, got an apartment for when I returned in New Mexico, in Albuquerque, and I got a storage unit, put my car and everything in the storage unit, and then went and got on a plane like 3 or 4 days later. So I drove across the country. I had a few days to get an apartment, rent a storage unit, get settled, got my stuff packed up, went to the airport, and then I flew from Albuquerque to Los Angeles. And it was at midnight. This guy met me at the airport and gave me a sitting. Somebody arranged it. Like, he left his family. I think it was probably a weeknight. He had to go to work the next day. He came to the airport and gave me a sitting. Like, there's stuff like that exists. These people who cook for 10,000 people at a gathering, volunteering in the hot Indian sun. It's 110 degrees out there, and they're out there in these big stoves making vast amount of food. So there's layers to devotion and to commitment that I mean, I love this thing. It's great. It's the most amazing thing, but it's just so far. Like, I'm just not like there's things that people do that I'm just stunned at how much they're willing to give up their free time and energy, and how much sacrifice just amazing. Beautiful, sweet people, nicest people, just wanting to serve God the best they can. I've experienced this. And, there's also different levels of spiritual approach and spiritual condition, right? And so, like, when people talk about something like God and, religion, you grow up in a religion and you're told, you think about the book, the Bible, if you weren't indoctrinated into it being the Word of God, if your parents and your family and all your relatives and all the people that you grow up with are telling you this is the Word of God and Jesus is God's only son, and this is your thing. I mean, I'm talking about every religion, but I'm giving Christianity as an example. If you just didn't hear any of that shit and you grew up as an adult and you were handed this book and you heard the stories, you'd be like, this thing's fucked. Like, how do you guys believe it? I mean, when you hear about other religions, weird stories and things that are in it, right? And, when Jesus was around, it wasn't weird. When Jesus was around, he could explain things to you. Jesus would tell you what the stories meant in the Old Testament. He would tell you, what things were real, what things weren't, what things were, godly and what weren't. But Jesus' version of God, the way Jesus describes God, is so much different than the way the Old Testament describes God. They should never be joined together, because Jesus grew up believing the Old Testament bullshit, right? And at some point he went to India or did whatever he did, and he had a spiritual revelation, and he realized that his religion was horseshit. Like, it was just, it was stupid. It was not, that he needed something more. And through meditation, because it's always meditation, meditation is a natural process where you focus on one thing and it's a meditative state. It's a state of mind. It's a state of the heart. It's a state of being. And there's various forms of meditation. There's various abilities that people have. There's different things you can learn to meditate on. But he, at some point, found God inside himself, right? The kingdom of heaven is within. And he had a whole different version of what God was. His description of God in the Old Testament description of God, right, is like it's night and day. And so, there's limits to religion. Like, there's saints that grow up in a religion or are a part of religion, but they have to leave the religion behind because there's all this dumb shit, all this fake shit that's not true. But the majority of people grow up believing the Bible's the Word of God, but they don't read the Bible because they know when they read it, it doesn't make sense. The language doesn't make sense. There's weird shit in it, and none of it, tells you how to really connect to God. It's just, it's all this stuff about, it's either philosophical or, it's teachings more about material life than it is about how you connected to divinity within you. In fact, that doesn't really exist. Just like in the medical system, the allopathic medical system, there's no pill, there's no drug to naturally boost your immune system. Right? Your immune system can be made stronger by various substances, herbs, and things like this. And lots of the medicines that they make are derivatives of plants or some natural compound, a lot of the pharmaceutical stuff. But they don't give you anything that's going to naturally boost your immune system. Why not, right? Because it's a for-profit medicine that needs you to be sick. So as far as I know, Jesus' best teaching, his most sophisticated teaching, was the kingdom of heaven is within, which means you don't die to go to heaven. You can experience heaven right now. You have to look inside. And there's, lots of things in the Christian tradition that talk about going inside, which is a reference to meditation. But if you meditated, you wouldn't need the church. You wouldn't need the system. I mean, you could sit around and meditate together, but you would have a direct connection to God, right? There was a time where they wouldn't even let you read the Bible. Only priests could read the Bible, right? They wouldn't let you read it. It was written in Latin, and most people didn't speak or read Latin. And so they were the only ones who could read it. Then they had translated it into English, and then all of a sudden everyone's owning the Bible. But before you know it, people are not reading it because they don't understand the language, and most of it doesn't make sense anymore. And I've talked about this, that there's different ways that people would worship God. And the most primitive people, and this is the Old Testament stuff, was idol worship, because the people worshipped or respected a strong king or a strength, like physical strength. This is all about primitive, warlike, where they would worship some god, some bull, or some powerful animal, or they build these idols. And it was this idea that there was like some sort of divine force, and it was for the most primitive people. It would be a warrior, some guy with big strong arms and a sword, and something that people would look up to, right? They respected that somebody, dominant, like an alpha male type of human being or whatever. And then it became, there's this idea of worshiping nature, where they have these, Druidic and Native American, animalistic, where there's these, you just worship nature as a whole, like Mother Earth, the Divine Mother. And that's great for, people who worship nature are, they're good to animal life. They're kind to each other. They embrace femininity. The mother, God is the mother. Like God can be mother, God can be father, right? And so it's good, but they don't progress spiritually. They live, pretty much the same lives. They don't have really much ambition to change things, new inventions. They just keep to they live the same lives for, the same way that they lived 3,000 years ago. And so people look at it, with admiration, but it's still not really understanding God and the spiritual aspect. They talk very little about spirit and know very little about it, right? So you have these different things: warrior worship, idol worship, and then there was this idea of worshiping like a king. A king is the highest level of whatever it is. God is king. This very primitive idea. This is stuff you see in the Old Testament, and it's not. It's you're using people's material experience to explain God to them. God is the king. God is the these are the qualities gods have, and God, we are made in God's image. So God is just some guy sitting on a throne somewhere in the etheric world. But if he doesn't have a body, he's not a physical being. Then why would he be sitting on a throne? He doesn't just sit because he doesn't have anything to sit on, right? He doesn't have a body. And so, it's a very primitive understanding of the nature of God. In the Old Testament, it's an evil king, so it's even worse. Like, it's not even a good king, it's an evil king. And so the Old Testament's just like a horrible book in lots of ways. It's the philosophy, the way it presents God. And so the other thing is to worship man as Savior. Somebody's a saint, like Jesus, this idea, that there's somebody who's somehow higher developed than you spiritually, and you're worshiping him, and they're going to get you to heaven. And then there's the next step, which is there are higher developed souls, and they're not to be worshipped. They're an example for what you need to become. And, very few people reach that stage. And this idea that God is an abstract being, the essence of love, that is all, permeating throughout the universe, right? And, the majority of people just don't get to that stage because they just don't have it in them. They don't have the capability to do that. And so once you reach that stage, your journey's just beginning, and there's a vast amount of, there's no way to say it. Like, it's not space, it's not, things, it's not accomplishments, it's not levels. But in terms of, all the things that exist in the material world and all the ways that you are until you take your first step on the spiritual life where you connect to the divinity within you and your soul, there's so much more in that sphere. Like, if you were gonna, it's not there's no physical space, so you can't compare it space wise. You can't compare it in like terabytes or whatever it is, like whatever the next thing above terabytes is, right? But if you think about all the data it would take to get all the information in the in the planet, and then you compare that to the etheric world, because the etheric world's behind all the various planets and everything that's in the material universe, every sun, every star, every thing that exists. If you took all that data and you put it in some, it took so much computer storage. I mean, of course it wouldn't, because it's computer storage is physical, so it would be beyond that. But this is how much information is in the material universe. This is everything in the material universe here, in this database. And that database would be like a grain of sand on the ocean, like a large beach of the internal universe, the etheric universe. And so once you become a spiritual person, you have this vast area to journey through. And like anything else, there's milestones, there's accomplishments, there's things that you can achieve that, there's, I don't want to say rewards, but you move to another higher level. And these things exist. And so, people have to be aware about this. There's no sense of you made it. Like, this idea you just have to do one thing, which is accept Jesus as your Lord and Savior, and you're going to heaven. It's silly. Like, nothing else in the universe is like that, where you have to pass one small little test. You got to make one little decision. And with that decision, that's all you need to do, and you can just relax. And also this idea that heaven is like a vacation. Like, this thing was so hard, your life is so hard, but now you're going to, this idea of retirement. And, I saw my dad retire. He hated his job. He's a guidance counselor. He complained about it pretty much all the time. And I didn't talk to him that much, but I knew that he was, he was miserable in his job. And he retired, right after I graduated high school. Like, so he was, like I said, I just realized he was in his 60s. Like, I never made that connection, now that I'm in that age, right? So, but he retired. And he fell apart because the things he thought he loved to do, like he, played golf like once or twice a summer, 5 times maybe, and he sucked at it. And he thought he was going to play golf all the time, but like he was probably playing golf as much as he wanted to when he worked. He didn't really have any relationship with us kids. He didn't really have any friends. He had some old-time friends who, tolerated him, but he was, tough to be around. Like, he was just annoying, and, he was, whatever it is. Just, I mean, not a person that would have a lot of friends. He liked to watch TV and eat, but that's not a life, right? You're watching TV and eating. It's something when you work a job, and then you have your time where you need to recover. And so it's fine if you're, you have like your hobby is watching TV, if you're doing other things, and you have a life. You have your job, and then you have your kids, and you have your things, your duties that you have to discharge. And then you can spend a couple hours watching TV. You can't spend the whole day watching TV, right? You can't spend the whole day on Facebook or something like that, right? You just kills you. It's like, it's an unbalanced life. And so you have to have things to do, and you have to have goals, and you have to have a reason to get up in the morning. And even as much as you hate your job, if you don't have work to do, you don't have a purpose, you fall apart. Psychologically, you fall apart. You fall apart physically. Like, you have to have a purpose. If you don't have a purpose, then there's no reason for you to be here. You're just sucking up resources. You have to contribute something. As a grandparent, there's lots of things you could do to contribute to teaching your children and your grandchildren and helping setting them up for the future and being that, voice of wisdom and experience. But, most people just have failures. They fail at life so badly, they have nothing to offer. There's no wisdom there because they're just worthless piece of shits that failed at life, right? Now, how are they going to be, they lived a shitty life. How are they going to tell you how to live a good one? Right? All they can tell you is about their regrets and mistakes and all the bullshit things they did, because they don't know what the fuck they're doing, because they're failures. They've lived a failed life. They have never lived, people don't live successful lives because we live unnatural lives. And so we fail. You have all these milestones in your life. You have all the things you accomplished as a kid, graduating high school, graduating college, these things as a young adult, teenager, getting a job, having kids. And then after that, people just, all throughout that, people are living so unnaturally. They don't mature, they don't develop these milestones. And so they can't help you navigate life because they haven't learned to navigate lives themselves, right? And so, this is what I'm talking about, all these things. And, everything's a part of it. Your religion's a part of it, certainly. Because your religion, if it was successful, it would be producing saints, not fucking losers who don't even read the Bible, who don't even think about God, really, unless they need something. And all they think about is enjoying their lives. And, they're in church thinking about the football game they're going to watch or whatever it is going to be. They're not even focused on, they can't even give God their attention for 1 hour once a week, right? And so, never mind doing things for God during the week or the days or whatever. It's just a, thing you do, more social than anything else, or, more of just an obligation that you have to do. And, any excuse not to go to church or not to participate because there's no goals in it. It's not helping you achieve something. It's not dynamic. It isn't like it would be if you were around Jesus, if it was a living system, right? And I know this from what's happened to the Sahaj Marg system with this heartfulness debacle. There was the first master, Lalaji, who had people at his house. There was no organization. There was no official anything. People came to his house. He would give them this energy, this transmission, and he would, tell them, they prescribe maybe something, not mantras. There was no cleaning. There was no practice. There was nothing. And then he died 13 years later. His successor emerged, this guy Babaji, and he was instructed to register this as an organization. He wrote books explaining the system. He developed the cleaning method. He developed these preceptors so they could help people experience this energy. And, the method and the system were there. And then this guy Charji took over, and he was, a very successful businessman who knew how to, navigate the material world. And he was very comfortable going from country to country. He had already been, he lived in various countries. He had, great education, brilliant mind. He knew something like 29 languages when he died. I mean, he just had all, like to whatever level. And he just got everything. He understood it, and he was able to run the organization and develop ashrams and, put people in volunteer positions. I mean, he built one of the largest volunteer organizations in the world, if not the largest. And it was great. Like there's, and he could explain everything. He understood the system. He was just brilliant, and he just, was able to, be a conduit for the divinity flowing through him. And he left this piece of shit Daji behind to be the next master, and Daji just failed. And, just like with religions, and this system's supposed to be around for like tens of thousands of years in one form or another. Maybe not the organization as it was, I don't know. But right now it looks like it's on the fucking ropes, right? The energy's still there because the sitting's still at work. But it's already starting to get stupid. Like he brought this Brighter Minds thing in where it's some stupid scam called the midbrain activation scam where kids can smell colors and all this other stupid shit he's brought into it, right? And, it's a sad thing because this is what's happened to every religion, where there are some great spiritual people that came down, and when they were alive, it was dynamic, and they could tell you things, and all the practices make sense, and they could help you achieve what they were achieving. And you got, being around somebody who's achieved something, especially on the spiritual level, you start to embody their essence, and you start to, want to be like them. You start to, anything that you love, anything you, for example, when you become a parent and you say shit that you thought you'd never say that your parents said to you, like things that pissed you off as a kid, and then you're saying those same words to your own kids because you observe things, you watch people, and when you're around saints, you're around higher developed souls, you integrate that into your system, and it helps you become a better person and evolve, and gives you a goal to something to achieve. It gives you a reference point to how you could be like somebody else, right? And when that's gone, it's gone. And it fucking sucks, right? Like it sucks now, and I hope that there's some way that the system gets saved, and you think there's a pathway to it. But if not, it's just going to become another one of these bullshit religions that's lost its meaning and becomes a power organization that's there to manipulate people. And so when people write to me about, their mundane Bible bullshit, what I talk about here is so much more evolved, and not because I'm evolved, because there's higher levels to this shit, right? There's stuff, I'm on like what I consider a beginner on the spiritual field. I mean, you always kind of feel that way one way or another. But, there's so much more out there than these bullshit religions that people have been indoctrinated with. It's a lower level thing. And if it's all you can do, fine. But there's things out there for you. There's all this lower level shit. There's all this there's lots of things out there for stupid people. And I'm not saying this in an insulting way. It sounds condescending and insulting. But there's, the majority of people don't have the ability for abstract thought. They just don't have it. They can't think of things in abstract form. 60% of the people. And so, all those people need stuff that isn't of a higher nature. They can't understand abstract concepts. And so for those people, some of it's malnutrition, so there's lots of reasons for it. But there's got to be a lot of material for stupid people. The majority of TV shows, the majority of educational systems are for remedial minds. People who are, the norm is just, they're not very bright in terms of lots of things, right? They might have some things they're really good at. They may be a genius in one thing or another, but they really don't have the capacity for higher level thought. And that's sad. And so the majority of stuff is caters to, you see Trump catering to really stupid people. Trump just keeps on getting his messaging, keeps getting dumber and dumber, gets more and more dumbed down. And, that's great for him because more people are there. I could dumb down my message here. Not that this is some brilliant, sophisticated thing, and that's the sad part about it. There's so much more out there that's available, even more that I know, that I don't even talk about because people wouldn't understand it, right? And I know there's lots of things I don't understand, like that's out there available to people. Like, there's more that I don't understand than I do about the spiritual world, far more, and experiential stuff as well. But in terms of like the spiritual, the vast, infinite spiritual universe, we're talking about infinity, right? And there's infinite amount of experience and infinite amount of knowledge and stuff out there for people. And, people are lacking some mundane, low-level shit, right? And, so if anything is a little bit higher, you should realize, all right, this is beyond me. This is maybe beyond me. But people have to ridicule for it because they celebrate their stupidity. They celebrate their ignorance, their lack of evolution. They celebrate their mundane accomplishments. And they want to demonize anybody who rises above it, right? Like it's some, you're fucking everybody else by you're screwing the curve by actually, working on yourself and becoming a spiritual person. You're fucking it up for everybody else. And, and I'm a slacker and, kind of lazy, and I can appreciate that kind of stuff. But I mean, the way that people embrace stupidity is just, it's a crime. All right, I'm getting tired here. I've talked a lot today. So I'm going to wrap this one up here. I'm going to add the other voiceovers that I had for my regular video and for my Journey series. That'll be it for this one. And then for the video I'm going to make on the Gratefullness Meditation channel. But anyways, this section is done here. You know what? Let me just add this to what I was saying. So there's going to be 4 voiceovers here, and then there's the last one that I made yesterday. And so, when I started this section today, I was talking about how that there's people who love the Bible, there are people who are Christians, and there are people who hate it or dislike it or they're atheists. And then there's people in the middle who just really don't give a shit, right? And, people who do different religions or whatever. And, people are like, it's either all bullshit or it's all, it's God's, it's either the word of God or it's just a bad book and it's fake and Jesus wasn't alive, right? And, it's none of those things. There are valid points in every legitimate spiritual pursuit. And I don't know about the Old Testament. Like, it's the way they present God is so fucked. God is a powerful person. A person that left that comment had Thanos as his thumbnail. Like, somebody who likes the wrathful God, right? But there's things in the Old Testament, I'm sure, some things that are valid, at least before it got corrupted. And there's certainly things from Jesus' life, his example, and some of his teachings that are certainly good and valuable, right? It just isn't the end all. It isn't, it can be, it doesn't have to be all or nothing, right? Like all these things have their merits. Just like a person has goodness in them and a soul in them, and they have an ego in them, and it's a battle between those things. People are, you're like, people want to be. Everyone's like, is that a good person or a bad person? Well, really, like, isn't it more complex than that? Like everybody does bad things, everyone does good things, and it's a mixture, right? Is somebody trustworthy? Well, yeah, you can say something like that. No, that person's not trustworthy, but really, who is? I mean, given the system and the way people are, and just how you're pushed to be a lying piece of shit or whatever. And so, what I'm saying about the Bible or what I'm saying about these religions, they are wherever they are in terms of the levels of things. And they have some value as an introductory level thing, but they're kindergarten. And like everything else, you have to graduate to something better. And even if you're doing the right thing, there's levels in that thing, and you can always be improving. There's higher level teachings in everything. Like there are things that are aimed at people with remedial minds and the inability for abstract thought. And then there's teachings, within that, within anything, there's teachings for the higher level gifted people, right? Who have, some talent for something. We've all experienced this. We've all been in a situation where we're gifted at something, or we have more natural inclination towards something, and we pick it up faster than our peers. And also we've been in a situation where things don't come easily for us. And you see other people excelling because they're better suited. And you feel like a worthless, dumb piece of shit, but like everyone has those things, right? And so, it's never just this black and white binary thing that people want. Good or bad, good or evil, these things, like black or white, these, whatever it might be. It's always, it's always gray. And there's always room for improvement. There's always higher things that you can approach. There's always work to be done. And going back to what I was saying, I got interrupted. I interrupted myself, which I often do. But I was talking about how people have this, I was giving my dad as an example, that people have this idea you go to heaven and it's just vacation, 70 virgins and a mule. These promises that you'll be in this, you'll be rich and, you'll be, everything is at your disposal. It's just bliss and you're having pleasure all the time. And that's, a material version of heaven, because there's no pleasure in heaven. When you don't have a body to experience pleasure, there's no pleasure. Like when you don't have experience, you can't experience pain, there's no pain, right? When you're an etheric being. And so there's no vacation because you don't get tired. Like there's no sleep because you don't have a body. And so your etheric life, you're working for God, you're doing God's work, and you're grateful to do it. Work isn't a bad thing. And so there's no heaven where you just go and you're on vacation for the rest of your life. And vacations are, after you do a job well done. It's a chance to recover and, have a respite. But other than that, it's work, 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 work on a spiritual field. And work isn't bad when it's God's work. Work has got a bad name because you're doing a slave job that's beneath you in some way. It's, monotonous and it's dehumanizing, and you don't like doing it because it's unpleasant. But work on the etheric level, when you're doing God's work, has all these rewards. And so when you do graduate from this planet, you go back to work. There's no, I'm going to live the rest of my life in eternal bliss, because such things don't exist. There is points in your spiritual system that are so, like enjoyable. When you're on your spiritual journey, you come across these points. And if you are left to your own your own choices, you'll just stay in that condition forever because it feels so good. But it's, almost like a trap inside your internal system, because there's still more for you to go after that. As blissful as some experiences are, some conditions are, spiritual conditions, they're not the goal, right? The goal isn't happiness. The goal is to continue moving forward and play your part in whatever that is, because ever-changing, this ever-changing kaleidoscope of the divine universe, where you play some role and you're working for God, and that's, that in itself is the reward. Okay, let's, I got to really end this here. I'm going to add this, voiceover from yesterday, and then this video will be done. Greetings, brothers and sisters. So I've been happy with the flow of the I don't know if flow is the exact word, partially flow, and just the way everything sort of has been falling into place for these episodes. This is, the really good video stretch in terms of the things that I'm thinking about and coming to me spiritually, through the meditative process and the stuff that's happening in politics and the other stuff I'm covering. And the comments and the AI stuff, all of it, right? Like it's just sort of, each episode building on the next. Very easy for me to make these videos now. And so I've like kind of hit a groove. So this is Wednesday, February 19th. I already finished my video for today. Is uploading even as we speak. I think it is. Yeah. It's passed through the checks. And it's entitled Irrefutable Proof Trump Thinks His MAGA Supporters Are Morons. And I started to get into the whole thing with Zelensky. And then, I spelled irrefutable, right? And so that was kind of great. I'm going to capitalize MAGA here. And I'm actually looking at the spelling, which I usually don't. But anyways, there's already a tweet by Trump where he's just shitting all over Zelensky. And I got some great comments to get to. One by AI bot and another one that was, here, let me read the one here. And so this is a long comment. I'm going to read the response right underneath it. I wasn't going to cover this comment. Like I start reading it and it kind of made me laugh because it was so off base. Like it's a comment I would have, I make a decision whether I'm going to do a comment thing on it and I'm going to take a screenshot of it. And I might stop reading it because then it'll be sort of a surprise to me, the end of it. But this one I read through. It's a long comment, but I read all of it. And I was like, should I do a comment? Should I put this in a video? And a person wrote, going to be in the comment section, bro. And so that was kind of a confirmation for me to do it. Today's word is fraud. And so this person writes, people do people and yourself a disservice talking about conspiracy theories. This term was made up by the DIA, I don't know what that means, maybe the CIA, to discredit people who spoke up and loved their country. You should do some more research. I think I just started your video and I'm already floored by the bias. No one sits around and makes up conspiracy theories. People do, however, sit around and make up conspiracies all the time. In fact, it's the most common. So what is that you are trying to say? They don't exist? Theories are what happened, are collected because the real story does not make any sense. So the person misinterpreted, just didn't have the intelligence and maybe not the intelligence, but the capacity, the abstract capacity, the consciousness to understand what I was saying. And it wasn't complex. You guys who watch this video know what it is. I say all the time how they demonize conspiracy theorists, but, there's a word for it, and it's conspiracy. And so, in a way, I'm agreeing with this person's agreeing with me, but I go way beyond what this person's saying. Because this person's a right-wing person who says this stupid part here. This is the killer. The term was made up by the CIA to discredit people who spoke up and loved their country. This isn't about people who love their country specifically. This isn't about so-called patriots or right-wing people. See, right-wing people suck because you guys aren't confronting your own bias and your own bullshit, right? And I think maybe because of me hammering Trump, the person's triggered. But the fact is they don't understand what I'm saying, right? Because I was saying, what I always say. What I did was I show a few clips about, one clip was from Fringe, and this other clip I saw from that show, Night Agent, which I've talked about some other time. Show sucks and whatever. These shows start off good. It's like they start running out of money and their writing just dissipates. There's all these shows, the first two episodes are, pretty good, engaging, and then it's like they run out of money and the writing, the acting, and everything falls apart. It's like they try to hook you into some bad piece of shit show, and then you're like, all right, I might as well sit it out. I might as well watch the rest of it. But anyways, they said on the show, not everything's a conspiracy. And I was talking about how conspiracies are at the heart of all these different narratives and all these shows, and yet being a conspiracy theorist is somehow a black mark on your character and way to demonize people. So, it's more sophisticated than what this dopey person's saying, but they couldn't get what I was saying. And so there's no reason to write a comment. If you don't understand what the fuck I'm saying and you need me to explain it to you, then why are you complaining about it? What you should be complaining about is why you're so stupid. You can't understand what the fuck I'm saying because it's not rocket science. I mean, I think I'm very patient with the way I explain things. I think most people are able to understand these basic concepts, even if you're not educated, right? I'm not some brainiac that's talking in a professorial way. I mean, there might be I might have some, a larger vocabulary than some of the listeners, but there's plenty of people who aren't very educated and foreign people where there's a language barrier and they can totally understand what I'm saying. And I mean, I'm not saying this just about me. I'm saying about like if you don't understand shit, then don't comment. Like if your comment is coming out of some bewilderment, don't blame me because you're stupid, right? I've said this like don't blame me for your stupidity. That could be another T-shirt. Like I come up with great lines for T-shirts all the time. Don't blame me for your stupidity. So that's the first thing. The second thing was, let me get to the comment here. So one of my viewers left a comment, and the bot responses are amazing. And so the person writes, a few weeks ago, my mother tried to guilt trip me by telling me that my aunt's Donna's kids take turns coming over to her dinner. To her dinner. I said if she wanted her kids who cook her dinner in her old age, she was supposed to teach us how to cook. That ended the conversation. Smiley face. Lucky I had a boyfriend that showed me the ropes in my early 20s. Otherwise, I'd be useless in the kitchen. I was talking about food, but let me read the comments here because I have something to say about this. It's not your responsibility to cater to her. That was the first response. The second one, I am happy that you have a boyfriend who taught you to cook. Now, it shows that the intelligence of the machine recognized that this person said her boyfriend told her how to cook. Like it can conceptualize and come up with a response. It's just that it's so mechanical that it's something like it doesn't go with the flow of the conversation and it doesn't fit with the video. I mean, it's just so bad, right? But anyways, I want to just say one thing about food here. I was talking about how I'd hope to teach my kids how to cook. Like, I've said this in recent videos. Like, I just feel like I'm a competent human being now. Like, as competent as I could be, right? I've always been hurry things and, being dyslexic and, just not understanding the material world and, forcing things and breaking shit. And, when I was younger and just not taking my time. And, I'm still fairly sloppy. Like I leave a mess behind me, but I'm getting better at it. I put more effort into it. I don't believe in the word pride, but there's gains and things I've made in my life that I don't want to say I'm proud of, but like, it's the stuff that was hard for me to do. Like there are things that were hard for me to do, like being grateful in a marriage or a relationship where I just focus on being grateful, not think about the negative things, which, both negative things and positive things appear very strongly in front of me, like more intensely than I think the normal people. And so I've learned to just ignore any, negative thoughts and negative whatever it is. And it's helped me greatly in my, my second marriage and, towards the end of my first marriage. Like, and I had to work at it. It wasn't something that came natural for me. And this other thing where I slow down and do things more meticulously because I'm not a meticulous person. But, Tuesday Paul screwing over Thursday Paul, I've talked about that. Where I do something where I know that I'm going to have to suffer for it later on. And I've gotten much better at that. So, there are things that come naturally to me. And I want to get back to the cooking thing in a second. And so you guys who have been watching my videos and seen my pond, today's Wednesday. By the time you watch this video, it'll have warmed up. The temperatures for the remainder of the week are, it's today is a high of 21. It was 6 degrees this morning. Tomorrow's going to be 8 degrees and 19 as a high. Then Friday, 26 degrees and 9 degrees as a low. And then Saturday, 31 degrees and 19. And then it gets up to 39 and then into the 40s for the next, so many days. It gets back down into the high 30s. But it looks like we're above freezing then for probably the rest of the winter. Like the winter's probably over. Maybe there'll be some really cold days in March. But there's been a long, cold, hard winter. And my wife and I have both gone through some things. Each one of us have had our specific thing. She has a death of a parent, and I had, some stuff with my kids. And, we both are suffering with the other person too. And just, it's been a winter that's gone by fairly quickly, but just really cold, like just cold and, been a struggle. But I feel positive, and then, of course, all the intensity and all the shit that I cover on a daily basis and the world, going to shit. But anyways, I've had to keep this pond going. And I have these 4 days where it's going to be freezing. And the water, because the pump is pumping the water up into the stream, it ends up like the water just doesn't return back into the pond. It ends up sitting on top and freezing. Like there's a layer of ice in an ever-growing airspace until the pump has pumped up all the water. And there's a shelf of ice above the pond, which is just totally not ideal. And then my fish have nowhere to go. Like the fish can survive the water freezing, and they can be frozen and then come back, they go into suspended animation, as can the frogs. There's a couple frogs in there. But they can't survive no water. and no, so I've had to keep this thing going with the, I can either turn off the pump and let it freeze, or, I can continuously put water into it. And so because it never gets above freezing, I have to make sure that I get all the water out of the hose. And yesterday, a guy showed up to fix the internet, which he didn't. And I was bringing home groceries, and I was not in my, I have a big snowsuit and things I put on to keep warm. And I wasn't in that. And I went to make sure all the water was out of the hose. And I did not as good a job as I usually would. And so I went to fill the pond, and it was the hose there was water in it. And I've dealt with this before, because when I had cows, I had to, in my first homestead, which is in a colder place. It was in the mountains in Virginia, and it was just, it was some really cold. It was 3 months of freeze there. And, I had to make sure that the cows had water every day. They could not have water. And so I kept a spare hose in the basement, and I tried to drain the hose as much as possible. And I learned how to do it then. And most times I did, but if I did somehow leave some water in it and it froze, I would bring that hose to the basement and take the other one out, because it was a must that I get it done. But the hose here, there isn't really as good a setup. Our basement's smaller. It's a whole thing. And so I had to drag the hose in and partially drag it in, because there's only a part of it that froze. And the thing took me 30 minutes, right? And I was out in the cold. My hands got cold. I do an exercise where I lift these weights and walk around the pasture. They come in. And I do, this couple of exercises, and I run on this little stair stepper, this $80 stair stepper. It's kind of cool, this thing. And I've gotten better shape. My heart's really doing better since the COVID stuff. And so I feel pretty good. Then I take a cold bath, and my hands were freezing by the time I got in. The dogs had been out there too long. It was just so fucking cold out there. It was because I didn't have, because I got out of my routine, right? And what I've learned is, as I've gotten older, is just to, stick to a routine as best as possible. And then do things in a way, because when you fail and you do, like with this case, it cost me 30 minutes out in the fucking cold. It just was totally unnecessary. It was a waste of time, and it was unpleasant. I was just, I'm dealing with water, so I'm getting wet. The whole thing fucking sucked, right? But anyways, going back to this thing with food. People think about ingredients for food, and they think about the type of the spices and the things that go into it to make it flavorful. But there's the pranic energy. Prana is like the loving energy that people have, the creative force that people have in their system. Love energy, And the people who cook with love or who are, connected to God, the energy of the food is just better. And I can like tell the difference. And it's something that I could never prove to people or really even describe. But, some people have better energy. And you see people who are kind of lifeless and zombified, they might be able to cook flavorful food. But if you're not able to pour your love into it, I learned this years ago. I was taking this New Age sort of seminar, and this woman was a medium, a channeler. She was, kind of good at her job, but she was kind of fucked up too. But she was, she had some real stuff. And there's this thing where you muscle test something. You put it in front of your belly where there's these energetic chakras that are, about your consumption, your digestive chakra, these things. And you hold the food there. There's different ways to muscle test. If you go to a chiropractor, some of these people know how to do it. Some of these alternative medical people. And then you hold your arm up, and the things that you're supposed to have and eat will make you, will be strong. And your arm will be strong. It'll be hard for them to pull your arm down. But if something is energetically bad for you, if you hold it in front of your belly, your arm just gets weak. And I noticed it. I've done it before, and it works. I mean, at least, I don't recommend things, like I said before, but it's something that I've, experienced as being successful. And she said that one time they came in and someone brought in chocolate chip cookies. And everybody who was taking the class tested positive for them. And some of them, were people who didn't eat sweets or, it wasn't something they would normally eat. And the woman, they kind of were trying to figure out why everyone was tested positive for them. And she said that her loving grandmother, who was just this gem of a person, made the cookies. And she made them with pouring her, her love into the cookies. And so love energy, supersedes. And this is part of the Sahaj Marg philosophy. And also eating the food with gratitude. This second master Babaji, he would eat the food and think that the particles of the food would make him divine. Like all the particles of food would be divinizing his system. That the food that he was eating was divine food offered to him by God, and he'd eat it with gratitude and would have the idea as he ate the food, the particles of the food would be divinizing his system and purifying his system, which is, it's kind of a difficult way to eat, when you rather just sit there and wolf down the food and enjoy it. But, this is the whole idea behind the energetic aspect and the intent, superseding, how healthy something is or how the ingredients, sometimes when you're so starving, if you're in a situation where you haven't eaten for like a day or two, or you're really famished, you're camping, or you're, out in wilderness, you did a lot of exercise, and you eat something and it never tasted so good. Because it's just, you're starving, you're really hungry, and your appetite's, you're alive, and you're exercising, your body's eating sustenance, and you just feel better about meals like that. So there's a whole other aspect about this thing with food. I think I was always naturally good at cooking. I was at a young age. I started to cook things. I learned how to make omelets and a few different dishes, and then I took a home ec course. I learned how to make like apple fritters and other shit like that. And then of course as I lived on my own, I started to develop skills. I ate macrobiotic food, so I learned how to cook that. And then I worked in restaurants and I learned things from chefs and things. And then some other people I learned stuff from. And so now I'm just like good at it. But I've always had some people are just better at making food. Like I'm not a I don't like to make like fancy kind of designer foods, but I make foods that are, that taste good and are, healthy and just, whatever it is. Like things that I can eat pretty much every day. Like I could eat the same foods, over and over again because they're all good. Like I make a good chili and a good gumbo and, not the kind of stuff that you go to Louisiana and get. Like people who are gumbo aficionados would not look good on my gumbo, would not like my gumbo, right? But it just tastes good. Or the other things I've learned how to make, right? The various recipes. And, it wasn't something I aspired to do, but you have to eat. You have to learn how to, you have to learn how to cook because everyone should know how to cook. Like, despite how rich you are or the kind of people in your life, it's just a necessity. It's bare basic knowledge because eating is one of the, things that keeps you alive, right? And it's, most people just don't learn the basic skills or understanding nutrition and how to prepare things and the best way to prepare things and the rest of it, right? I mean, I'd like to be able to dress animals. I haven't really gone hunting. I can flay a fish and I can do some of those other things. But everyone should learn these skills, right? Everyone needs these types of skills, and people just don't have them. I mean, that's it's going to be hard for people to survive when people aren't there to do these things for them. But anyways, let's get into the Trump stuff. Okay, I'm going to wrap this one up here. Only spirituality will save this world. It's paramount, definitely important for the apocalypse and the ascension. Everyone have a blessed day and be grateful.